Thank you, Leah. Good morning, everyone, and or good afternoon, depending on where you are. And I realize that many folk who sign up for First Five Alameda's training at First Five aren't just in Alameda County anymore, that their reach is now far and wide outside of Alameda County and even outside of California. So that's exciting. And as you all know, First Five does record these trainings that are housed on their YouTube page for you, your staff, your families, whoever, to go look at again and again and again. So I'm excited that they're doing that, and they've been doing it since the beginning of the global pandemic. All right, so we have a lot of information, as always, to share, to negotiate, and I like to say vacillate with all of you adult learners about today. So I will share my screen, Leah, and then we'll jump right in. All right. So if you can see my screen, give me a thumbs up. Thank you, Susan. I see Susan and Flandra and Ron and Nora and Tanya. All right, they're showing their faces. Then I see Miss Valerie Hamilton. Awesome family child care provider in East Oakland. I had the pleasure of being her mental health consultant years ago. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful woman doing wonderful work. And I had the pleasure of being her college instructor. Also, committed adult learner also. Welcome, Ms. Val. It's good to see you. Good to see you. All right, so we're going to jump right in. So just so that you all don't think something is happening to me, I have two really big monitors here. So when you see me look over here, I'm actually looking at you all are trying to track the chat, even though Leah's helping me with the chat. And then my camera and things are here. So when you see me glance to the side, I'm actually looking at you all are trying to see the chat, just as an FYI. Leah just put the link to the slide deck and some other handouts in the chat. So to the 34 people who are here today, welcome, welcome, welcome. So although we're recording this and it'll be on the YouTube page for First Five Alameda, along with those handouts, there's another document. It's about 172 pages filled with executive function activities that you can do with children you teach, children you care for, children you love, children you parent, just young children in your life. But that document will only get emailed to those of who showed up to the actual live training. We won't be putting that, well, I should say I won't be giving that to Leah to put on the YouTube page as a handout. So an extra bonus for all of you showing up today live and in person. And I'm sure you're all going to really appreciate the document. Okay, so let's jump into executive functions, core strategies for everyday interactions, sponsored by First Five Alameda County. All right, so as Leah said, I'm Shawn Bryant. I'm going to be your facilitator on this learning journey. Just a little bit about me on the screen. This is my 30th year in early childhood education. Still excited, still motivated and committed to young children and the adults who care and educate them. That's really, really important. What you see on the screen here is a group of educators that I've been working with for 4 years, going into the 5th year. It's a Montessori-inspired school in Marin City that actually offers a private education free of charge, mostly to Black and Brown children in Marin City. And I've been their PD facilitator, working with their parents and the teachers for 4 years now. And then I just love, love, love and adore them, and always excited to learn and grow with them. And I just decided to put them up there today. And of course, I encourage you to follow me on social media, just to see what's going on around my thinking related to early childhood and families, and how do we re-examine and rethink a lot of the things that we take as true and valid, but don't seem to work for a lot of the young children across this country. Yeah. And of course, in this virtual learning process, the three things that we try to bring forward is to raise awareness today about executive functions and skills, to learn some new strategies around how to promote those skills in ourselves so that we can help young children practice them. And of course, the opportunity to practice those new skills in our short period of time together today. I've gone ahead and jumped in and created some community agreements for us. There are 12 on the screen, but I really want you to think about how open are you to new ways of knowing about this, I call it a $50 word called executive functions, that actually means something that most of us are engaged in this ongoing and continuous way that we don't even think about. And how do you consider your role and responsibility in young children's lives in this notion of executive functions, and how you can take that back to your role and responsibility with and for them? And of course, focusing on aspects that you can take back to your practice, to your work, to your parenting in meaningful, practical ways. So I'd just like to encourage everybody right now, and if you haven't been able to access the slide deck that Leah just put into the chat box again, to definitely grab a pen, a paper, something to write with. Although you have the handouts and a copy of the slide deck, we want to encourage you to engage to make the learning concrete. And we know that when we write, neuroscience tells us that that's one of the major ways that our learning is not just remembered, but becomes concrete. So I want to encourage you all, as someone who loves typing and dislikes writing, but knows the benefits of writing, to challenge yourselves with writing more today. And in addition, we always use the chat box here at First 5 Alameda's training to engage, to stay on the topic, to share resources, but not to offer advice or sell anything. We want you to share your knowledge with other learners. That's why the chat box is so important, but we don't want you to tell anybody what they should be doing. And we definitely don't want you to try to sell anything to anyone, but free resources, we definitely encourage you to share those in the chat. Yeah, unfortunately, I had to start adding that because we had a session one time on trauma and someone was offering advice in the chat to someone around something that I said I wasn't answering because I wasn't a medical doctor. And they didn't list themselves as a medical doctor, but they were giving advice. So in full transparency, we don't want us to do that to other people during the First 5 session. All right, so let's jump right in. So I'm going to ask about 4 people to unmute and read what's on the screen. To unmute and read what's on the screen. So because I see Ron and I know Ron, I'm going to ask Ron to read that next slide for us.
Sure. So have you ever thought that this child is smart, scattered, succeeding?
Yeah. Have you ever considered a child you're looking at or working with? You said to yourself, this child's smart. This child's kind of scattered, but this child's really succeeding. What we know is children who struggle with executive functions often have trouble paying attention, have trouble focusing, they have trouble organizing, trouble planning, trouble starting and completing tasks, and trouble shifting attention from one task to another. So oftentimes when I say this to adults, particularly people who are managers and supervisors, their immediate thought goes to, I know some adults like that. And this is true. This is true. It's because if it's not promoted and that skill isn't built, we carry the executive function deficit into adolescence and adulthood. We're going to hear more about that. All right. Where is she? Hillary, because Hillary was smiling as soon as she cut her camera on. Would you read the next one for us, Hillary?
Absolutely. Have you ever thought this child is impulsive and making poor decisions?
Thank you, Hillary. That's right. It's important for us to know that this notion of EF, we sometimes call it, or executive function issues, don't have much to do with intelligence. I'll say it again. They don't have much to do with intelligence. That children and adolescents with executive function issues are just as intelligent, or that word that many people still use that I try not to use, They're just as smart as their peers who don't have executive function challenges. So it's not about intelligence. Thank you again, Hillary. All right, next slide. All right, I see Angela Howard. All right, we're going to ask Angela to read the next slide for us.
Have you ever thought this child is forgetful, losing items?
Yeah, forgetful. I know some adults who lose items. I'm one of those adults. When I get to the front door of my house, before I close it, I tap my pocket and say, I feel my wallet, I feel my keys, and I feel my phone. If I don't feel those three things, I go back in the house. It's just my often reminder to myself. But current research has helped us to understand that it's actually, we're really not clear exactly what causes executive function issues, but we're learning more all the time. We're 100% not clear what causes these executive function deficits or issues, but we're learning more and more and more. And some of that research we're going to share today and some of the practical ways that we can work with young children. And before we move to the next slide that I'm going to ask Otis Ward to read for us, we had some technical issues when we tried to do this another time. And then literally we stayed on the call and just had what ended up being a really curious conversation with about 50 people who stayed on the call. And we just engaged in a conversation about executive functions. And they asked lots of questions and I kind of just answered those questions. And then from that, with First File, we started thinking about the possibility of not so much of these kind of transactional trainings, but going deeper with learning communities around some of the trainings that's been offered, meaning you can go access them on the website and then a small number of people will sign up and we'll take deeper dives. So it actually encouraged us to think differently. And we're hoping that we're able to do that this year. But one of the things that came up in that conversation, and unfortunately we recorded it, but we only sent it to the people who were there. So if they were there, they got a copy of it, which only makes sense. But a few of the people who were on the call who are here today kind of said, wait a minute, how can I help my staff who I'm looking at these things may have some executive function concerns or issues? And then Lee and I kind of talked, and one of the things that we might be offering sooner rather than later in the next program year is executive function issues concerning adults. So we're excited about that also, around how we can support them in the context of work as our subordinates, colleagues, or just other adults that we work with who may be parents and families or people in communities that we see in our clinics or programs. All right. Here you go, Otis.
Have you ever thought this child is disorganized or slow to task?
That's right. Thank you, Otis. Disorganized, can't seem to get things in order, to put them in sequence, can't seem to make sense of what's around them, or slow to task. My godson, who is now 10, when he was 4, actually when he was a little younger than that, I recognized that he was always taking time to do things. And we weren't sure what it was, because it oftentimes looks like children are ignoring you, but he wasn't ignoring us. If we said, you know, it's time to get our coats, to get in the car, he would, this is when I realized something else was happening. He would look to where his coat was in the closet and then look back to the door if I was standing at the door. And then it would take him a moment and he would go get his coat and slowly come. And it looked like he was just oftentimes just taking his time or being a little stubborn, but his brain was actually processing differently around needing us to do more to build his executive functions. And we're going to talk about ways that we do this. So we heard for people who read these things that many of us had thought about children. Have this ever rung true for any of you? If some of these things have rung true for you or you witnessed them from someone else, just put a Y in the chat. If any of these that they talked about in terms of children who were forgetful, losing items, disorganized, slow to task, impulsive, making poor decisions, seems scattered, seems smart even, that word, just put a Y in the chat. Yeah, many of us. And if we don't build these skills in young children, and we're going to talk about those core skills, we carry these into adolescence and into adulthood. So therefore, our colleagues, our coworkers, our partners, our spouses are all affected in many ways by our own executive functions. So this is why we want to make sure we understand what executive functions are, and that we're building it in young children. So we have some expectations from our time together today. We're going to look at how do we develop basics understandings around executive functions, how to build the right supports for children related to executive functions, and how do we implement those strategies and activities with the right knowledge and understanding as the adults in young children's lives. So those are what we hope to be the main takeaways for everyone today. So let's start here with this notion of this term executive functions. It's really an umbrella term, right? That many of us are not so familiar with as adults, because it refers to this group of what they call mental skills that allow us to set goals. And Philip David Zalazzo at University of Minnesota, he's always using that word goal. And I struggle with the goal part sometimes, but the ability to set goals and to get things done, to set goals even in childhood and adulthood and get things done, right? So I was on this call the other day with the National Head Start Association, and one of the people basically was, she was from South Carolina, and a bunch of the people on the call had doctorate degrees. So she kept, she was really excited about that. And she kept saying, she had wished that was something that she could do. So she was articulating that as if it was something beyond her. And because she brought it up about 3 times, on the 3rd time, I kind of unmuted and I kind of said, having a PhD simply means that they were able to set goals and complete it. It doesn't mean that they're more intelligent than you. It doesn't even mean they make more money than you. Because I know 2 PhDs who are still living with their mamas, okay? So this notion that one acquires this level of education simply means that that level of executive functions, their follow through, and we're going to talk about which one that is, the ability to set goals and get things done is strong in them. It's strong in them. But there are some executive functions that you have that I'm sure are stronger in you than it is in some people who may have doctorate degrees or PhDs. All right. So this ability to set goals and get things done around these group of mental skills. And then we're going to talk about the 3 main skills: working memory, inhibitory control, and what I call cognitive flexibility. Some of the researchers are now calling it flexible thinking. I like working memory, inhibitory control, and cognitive flexibility because it's easy for me to remember, because I've abbreviated that as WIC. Women, infants, and children. We still need to change that to PIC, parents, infants, and children. But I remember working memory, inhibitory control, and cognitive flexibility because I think of WIC. All right. We're going to unpack those in much more detail throughout our short time together today. So when we think of executive function tasks, when we think of being in the moment, asking a young child to clean up their playroom, right? Or to clean up the area or the living room or the classroom or their living space, being able to do it without much delay. Being able to perform simple tasks, something as simple as putting toothpaste on my toothbrush as a 4 or 5-year-old, brushing my teeth and then rinsing my mouth, being able to somewhat dress myself. Those are all goals without being distracted, So is a 3-year-old who just turned 3 June the 12th, who lives here at my house. So my cousin and her husband, they had an electrical fire in their house some months ago, and them and their 3 children, someone who'll be 5, the 3-year-old, and the 6-month-old. Yeah, my life changed overnight, right? They live here with me. Love them. But the 3-year-old was in the bathroom, and his sister was saying something to him, and he got excited. So without finishing the task of, pulling his shorts back up, he ran into the other room to see what was happening. He was easily distracted. Some of it is age appropriate. Then some of it is, how do we build the skills in young children in these daily experiences? And then we think of, how do we inhibit behaviors? I want something, that Tanya has, but I don't grab it. I'm able to ask, or I'm able to share. How do I build those skills in young children? And for most of us on this call who work with young children in different capacities, or adults who work with young children, the big takeaway for us in early childhood is the research continues to confirm and reaffirm the strong associations that are more than IQ, but the strong associations with kindergarten readiness tests in terms of children's entry levels concerning math and literacy as the drivers. So when we think of this notion of school readiness, what we're finding is children who have more executive functions that are strong, they actually are faring better when it comes to those expectations at the kindergarten door. All right, so I said earlier, there are 3 core executive functions: working memory, and we're going to define it in just a moment, inhibitory control, and cognitive flexibility. These are sometimes called the core EF skills, the core executive function skills, the 3 core, and these are the 3 we're going to unpack today. Now, here's some other things. There are actually more than 3. So I typically stop at 12 because, neuroscientists don't always agree. Some of the best arguments you ever want to see is 2 people who think they're the smartest people on the planet arguing. Some people say that they're 13. Some people say that they're more discrete sub skills that people like to list. Basically, the people who I read and follow are saying basically that there are 12. And that's where I stopped here at. And one of the people who I follow religiously is Dr. Adele Diamond. I feel important because I follow her on Twitter, and she followed me back on Twitter, and then she sent me a direct message. I felt like a movie star because everything she reads and writes and trains on, I follow. So much of what you are getting today is from that fantastic researcher. All right. So when we think of those core 3, working memory, inhibitory control, and cognitive flexibility, know that there are others that we deal with also: task initiation, sustaining our attention, the notion of how do we plan, organizing, how do we utilize time management, metacognition, the thinking about our thinking, which is really reflection in many respects. This goal-directed persistence, that what I want to achieve, I keep going at it despite barriers. Response inhibition and stress tolerance. What's my tolerance level for distraction? What's my tolerance level for people who I'm at my office and I'm typing a report, and Susan comes in and she's asking me this curious question, and I don't know how to stop her from doing that. So I answer her curious question, then it takes me too long to get back to work. How many of you have ever had that problem? That's that stress tolerance. That's that, how do we go back to being goal-directed after we sustained our attention and we're distracted? So how do we build the skills to stop that from happening? So here's a caveat before we move into our first activity. We actually know that trouble with executive function isn't a diagnosis or learning disability on its own. I'll say that again. Trouble with executive function isn't a diagnosis or a learning disability on its own. However, when children, and I'm just going to add that word, and adults have a weakness in these areas, it impacts their learning, it impacts everyday learning and everyday life. All right. So these aren't diagnoses or learning disabilities on their own, but when there's a weakness, it will impact how I learn in terms of everyday interactions and how I learn in life. And for many of us as adults, that includes our work lives. All right, the next 2 slides, I'm going to need 2 brave volunteers. All you're going to do is they're going to be about 20 words on the screen. The first person will read those words out loud. Then on the next screen, a different person will read those words. All right, so we're going to need 2 volunteers. So let me show you what it is, because no one's volunteering yet, so that people see what it is. Susan raised her hand. Come on, Susan. We want you to read these words out loud. Read all 20 words out loud from red to green. You did raise your hand, right, Susan?
Yes, I did, but I forgot to unmute. Okay.
Okay.
Red,
Thank you.
green, blue, yellow, pink, orange, blue, green, blue, white, green, yellow, orange, blue, white, brown, red, blue, yellow, green.
There you go. So Susan just achieved, thank you, Susan, an executive function task. She did. She read these words from left to right, from top to bottom. The words are colored, their color, and they're spelled on the screen, and she did that successfully. Now we need another volunteer. Otis, you raised your hand. All right. So Otis, yours is going to be a little different. You're going to say the color of the word. You're going to say the color of the word.
Green, yellow, white. I guess that's pink,
Mhm.
pink, orange, blue, red, yellow, green, white, green, red, blue,
Okay.
green, red, pink, blue, yellow, pink, green, orange.
All right. Let's give Otis a hand. You did great, Otis. I jacked this up when I did it. So what we just saw Otis achieve and what Susan achieved were both executive function tasks. Susan's task, as we all know as adults, was probably a little less complex, right? Hers was really about just reading the words. Otis's task had more difficulty. He had to do something that's indicative of executive functions. He had to slow down. He had to read the word, but to see what the color was and decide. We're asking him to say the color of the word, but the color that he sees first is the color green, but we're asking him to what? Slow down, slow down. That's inhibitory control, and actually read the color, and the color was red. He did a fantastic job. He did a fantastic job. I struggle with this often, but his first attempt at it, he did really, really well. So what we see on this continuum of building executive function skills, how they were just demonstrated, we don't leave Susan if she were metaphorically a child, and we don't say, oh, Otis has achieved it, and leave him. We actually build skills in both of them, regardless of where they are on the continuum. This is that work that we often kind of let go of. So thank you, Susan, and thank you, Otis. Angela said, over the impulse to say the word exactly versus the color. There you go. And he achieved that really well. And possibly too, I tend to speak, and this tends to move really fast. So sometimes I have to slow it down. So if Otis's natural constitution is not to do that, it becomes what? A little bit more practical for him to achieve that goal, right? Of not going on saying green, but slowing down and actually seeing that it says red. When we think of working memory, he's calling what he knows about colors forward, inhibitory control. How do I slow down? In that cognitive flexibility, what's happening different here? How do I need to shift? Yeah. All right, so remember we said those core 3 executive functions are working memory, inhibitory control, and cognitive flexibility that I call WIC. So we're gonna dive into those quickly in this first hour so that we can unpack some other aspects. So essentially, working memory is our ability to keep information in our mind so that we can put it to use at some time. This is about taking in new information and us using it to complete a task, something as simple as following simple instructions for children from adults, or offering simple reminders to children. Something as simple as giving an instruction to a child may be an executive function deficit or issue, and it may not be. So the 3-year-old here, he recently went to a speech assessment. His parents did it last year, and they said he didn't qualify. And then I kind of told them, just do it again. And they did it again. And this time I went. I didn't go the first time. This time I was present and I said a lot, and he's receiving speech now. But one of the things I had the speech therapist and the special education teacher understand was, because they probably 90% of the assessment was around academics. Does he know colors and shapes and all of those things? And I kept pressing the issue around his receptive skills and his expressive skills are not parallel. That when he was 2, his receptive skills, what he understood and could tell back to the world, were far exceeding what he could articulate. When he was 2, I could give him a 3-step direction. So that was not a simple instruction. I could give him a 3-step direction, and I saw that he would follow through. That wasn't the issue. The issue was when he speaks, it's inaudible for many of us because we can't make out what he's saying, and that's the support he needs. And that's literally what executive function skill building is about, knowing where the gap is for young children so that we plug in the right kind of support. And for working memory, how do we remember and organize key pieces of information? That could be reading a story, playing a board game, or something a little bit more complex for us at work. So some strategies that we think of when we think of working memory is, how do we think about when we talk about working on visualization skills? How do we think about something that's in mind? How do we see something before we see it? University of Washington, Dr. Patricia Kuhl and her research team are actually putting MEGs on babies, and they've actually found that babies actually, what they believe, I should say, is see pictures of what they want before it happens, even in infancy. So this working on visualization skills as an executive function starts in infancy. And you can Google Pat, and she's talking about it online. Or if you've been through a Mind in the Making training, one of the videos, she talks about it there. Then this notion of having children show you. So simply saying, show me, and them teaching you what it is and going through the steps builds their executive function skill. Board games is one of the main things that I often tell people, you should have it in your classrooms for your Head Start children. You should play it at home. Yeah, handheld devices are important. And most of the youth and children in my life all play games on their phones. But we purposely do family game night at my house, where it's nothing but board games, where you have to sit down and negotiate with other human beings across a table or on the floor around these games that are important. Also playing Uno. So when we think of playing cards, it was always my go-to introductory as a preschool teacher and even as a mental health consultant. I kept Uno cards in my car because children were familiar with the colors and the numbers. And as they kind of got that part down, then we could build on and actually play the game correctly. Calling on what? Working memory. How do we help children read without passively listening, right? How do we take longer content and break it down? And that's not just for children, that's also something that adults need. How are we using our 8 senses to learn? How are we making sure that children are learning using their 8 senses? So one of the things that I often share with teachers is when those children want to climb up the slide and you tell them they have to go down the slide on their bottom, but they're 4.5 and they've been doing that for 4.5 years and it's no longer fun, that what they're actually using is their preperceptive skills, which is a sense that they're calling on there and their body is saying, use it this way. And it's not wrong. How do we come to understand this? That's a strategy, and to see it as skill building and not something we want to tell children they can't do if we understand that they're more than 5 senses. And right now they're 8. Some people are even saying they're 9. You know, we're always learning and growing as human beings. So if you situate it as 8 or 9, it's fine. And then how are we making sure when we think of working memory that it's hands-on, is meaningful, and it's engaged for young children? And we're going to talk about some specifics in the next hour. Working memory. So when we think of inhibitory control, this is our ability to what? Stop before we respond and start something else or go on impulse. Now, I am guilty. I am guilty. I say it out loud. I used to be famous. If you sent me an email and I didn't like the tone, before I could take a breath in and out, I would hit reply and start typing. And one of my mentors, Dr. Patricia Nunley, who's my mentor and my godmother, she said to me one time, she always makes fun of me. She calls me her big brain baby. And I often think, is she really calling me a big head? But I know she loves and cares about me. But she said, you know, you don't have to hit reply, right? And I said, what? Because in my mind, it was mandatory that I hit reply. She says, you never have to hit reply. And then she says, if you hit reply, take the name out of who it goes to, type it, and just save it in your drafts. If you all could see how many emails are in my drafts, you would laugh at me. Talk about a therapeutic coping skill, but this notion of inhibitory control, and as I've gotten older, is not so important, but the ability to stop before we respond and not be so impulsive. How do we control our attention? Me typing the email therapeutically gets it out, but it's controlling my attention and my behavior and helps me to manage my emotions. I call it self-control at work. Self-control at work. So this notion of us thinking, if we think of inhibitory control, thinking before we act, it oftentimes keeps our feelings in check. It helps me to do that. And for young children, it can be something as simple as raising their hand instead of yelling out, right? Something as simple as, how do I manage the amount of time? Think of when you go into a breakout space and we say you have 10 minutes to share. That's really a time management to help you start and stop and complete the task. For many people who are time sensitive, then others like myself who are not time sensitive, we get into the conversation and we lose track of time in a positive way, not in a negative way. Because you know, those of us who have experienced trauma, it's easy to lose track of time, but it's based on the trauma. So I just want to be clear for those who are familiar with that. For young children, this notion of inhibitory control is, what is the morning routine like? Do I get up? Do I brush my teeth and wash my face? Do I go downstairs and eat breakfast first? And then do I get dressed? How do I do all of that without distractions? Or what are the distractions around me that need to be eliminated so that my inhibitory control can be what? Strengthened. So these are really easy. So figuring out what your stressor is and figuring out what a child's stressor is or stressors and developing the toolbox of resources that work best for them is important. When I was a supervisor, it was one of the things, I didn't do all things well, but one of the things that I think I did well was I knew each one of my staff individually. I knew what worked for one, did not work for the other. I knew if this worked for these three, it might not work for them too, so that I was offering them the right support at the right time. Just some interventions and strategies that you see on the screen. And this notion of being a role model. Role modeling is something that you shouldn't have to tell children, I'm role modeling this for you. They should be able to see you doing it each and every day, because you're demonstrating how, and then they pick up on it. Our third core executive function skill is cognitive flexibility. This is really about being able to see problems from multiple angles. Cognitive flexibility is really, for me, the core of an effective leader. Being able to see a situation and a circumstance from multiple angles and to find different ways to solve that problem. Not the one that best suits me, but the one that best suits the problem and those involved. It's much like being an effective coach or consultant. It's not about me and what works for me, but it's about what works for that teacher, that principal, that director, that team, that play group facilitator, that cognitive flexibility to see things from multiple angles and to find different ways to solve that problem. And for us, it's how do we help children as early as possible adjust to changing situations, especially when they don't go as planned? How do we set them up for that as early as possible so that they can easily switch from playtime to dinner time, opposed to switching from playtime to dinner time becomes a struggle. So we think of going back to, what do I need to put in there between that space of this 4-year-old playing and I need them to stop playing to then get ready to have dinner. What will work for them in the context and conditions in which we live, or how this classroom is set up if we're transitioning from free choice to lunchtime, or from outdoor time to snack time, or to rest time. And they're struggling to switch. And instead of us raising our voices, how do we help build those skills in them to build that switch that oftentimes needs to happen? And for us, it's oftentimes helping children learn problem-solving steps and how to fix them, how to use a problem to fix a mistake. And you're going to hear a lot about that as an emerging practice, using problems to fix mistakes in leadership, in management, but even in early childhood. Now, there's this thing here that I want to caution you all, that if you Google problem-solving steps for young children, you're going to get multiple things out there, because there are many expensive written curricula, many who we think of as expert folk who have written and publicized steps to problem solving. Here's what I've learned over the years. They're not all equal. Some of them miss crucial steps in helping children to problem solve. So be careful when you're considering problem solving for young children in missing crucial elements in the problem solving steps. So I won't throw anyone under the bus right now, but I'll just say they're all not equal. And I know many of you in California use some of them. Some are better than others. I'll say that. So the strategies and interventions that we're looking at when we think of cognitive flexibility is really when we think of our routines and our systems, because the routine is part of a system that you either create at home or at school, in some other place where young children go. Now, we like to say that at home, homes create rhythms, and schools and programs create routines. And they're much alike in many ways, but the subtle difference is in that home, the home creates a rhythm that either works for them or it works against what we're really trying to promote. And at school, the routines sometimes work well for the group of children, and sometimes the routines largely only work for the adult, right? So this problem-solving system that helps us to become more cognitively flexible, I should say, really should answer the question for us: how do we solve simple and complex problems? I like to call them everyday problems. Something as simple as, do I put on my red shoes or my blue shoes? It's a problem that I solved. How are the adults helping me understand that I solved the problem? And then I build on that with more what? Complexity. This visual charts, this is really just seeing the picture of what's expected. When we all know our brains remember what? Some of you heard me say this before. 80 to 85% of what we see, but only 10% of what we hear. I'll say it again for the people in the back. Our brains remember 80 to 85% of what we see, but only 10% of what we hear. This is why seeing the picture is so critical. There's even emerging research that says young children who were 2 and 3, when they were learning the alphabet, and it was posted and they could see the picture of it, they actually, not the rote one, but just seeing the picture of what they were experiencing around learning the letter B, actually reinforced and strengthened the learning. The visual piece helps cognitively. This notion of, how do I state what I plan to do out loud? Now, to many of us, this used to look like talking to ourselves, but nowadays, because most of us have these, right? I don't want to open it. It might jump to my ear, but people walk around all the time and it looks like they're talking to themselves. And now none of us pay any attention because we know that they're what? Largely on the telephone. But how do we move past that and actually walk around and say out loud what we're thinking? And full transparency is one of my core key skills that I do. My cousin and her children and her husband, they know I do it. They hear me talking to myself all the time, but they actually know that I'm thinking out loud about what I'm planning to do. And as someone who if I don't write it down, it will not happen. If I don't write it down, it won't happen. What I'm finding as I get older is that the thinking aloud is cementing and supporting what I've written down as a practice. Then this notion of how do we see other human beings do what I'm asked to do? This notion of adult modeling. How do I see them do what I'm asked to do? Now, the caveat here is adult modeling can be positive and negative. So how do we situate it on the positive side of making sure that we're modeling the right behaviors that are demonstrating this notion of flexibility in our thinking, changing course as adults so that children build on that. This question asking, many of us often hear when we go to places to learn that there are no dumb or silly questions. So my favorite question to hear a child say out loud is, I'm confused or I don't understand. Because to me, that tells me as the adult, and I wish I knew this 30 years ago, it centers to me as the adult, I need to rethink what it is I said and what it is they heard when they say I'm confused and I don't understand. Oftentimes what they're saying is I use too many words as the adult. I left out a key piece for their learning and it slows me down, this cognitive flexibility. So it's actually a strength when young children say that they're confused. That means they were paying attention and there was a gap in what I said or did and what they heard, right? And it could mean I need to add what? A visual to my words. Or it could mean I have too many visuals supporting my words. It could mean a lot of things. And this final one, this action around pausing, going back without losing focus. Earlier, Susan and I talked about being interrupted if we were writing a report and then having to struggle to get back to focus. This ability, that's cognitive flexibility, to be able to stop and start something, a short pause or a long pause and come right back to it without delay, It's always something that I'm building on. Because if I'm putting together a slide deck and the kids come in here and then we end up going downstairs, and of course they always follow me in the kitchen because they know whatever I eat, I'm going to give them some. I think they really have realized he's the snack person. Our mom and dad are going to tell us no, but if I walked out downstairs right now and went into the kitchen, because they didn't go to daycare today, they're going to follow me into the kitchen. And whatever I get, I'm going to give them both one. They picked up on it, that adult modeling. It's negative, but they picked up on it. When I do that, oftentimes they'll stop me and say, "You want to play with us?" And I oftentimes don't want to say no. And their mother and father laugh at me because they say, "We tell them no all the time. You don't want to tell them no. Something's wrong with you, Shawn." I see it differently and I end up playing with them for a little while. And then guess what will happen? When I finally get back into the office, I often struggle to refocus. I literally struggle to refocus. I'll spend an hour doing something different, checking email, going on social media, talking to my mom, texting someone. Then I realize, wait a minute, it's an hour and a half later. That starting and stopping and getting back to course is a demonstration of cognitive flexibility. Don't worry, there are more. We're going to get to more practical ones. I'm going to speed up now. So we're going to hear from Dr. Stephanie Carlson. This video is about 3 minutes and 22 seconds. I want you to, she says a lot of important pieces here, a lot of stuff. Some of the things I've shared already in bits and pieces, but she's going to contend with a lot. I want you to think of your top 2 things that you've heard and something new and novel that you've heard. And then what I want us to do, because this is going to be helpful to all of us because we'll all hear different pieces. At the end, the top 2 pieces that you heard and something new or novel, we're going to put that in the chat because what Lee and I'll do at the end, we'll save the chat and we're going to put those into a PDF and send them to you all so that we all get what we all heard because we're going to hear different pieces in these 3 minutes and 22 seconds where she talks about how do we come to understand executive function issues.
Trouble with executive function isn't a diagnosis or a learning disability on its own. But when kids have a weakness in this area, it impacts learning and everyday life. The term executive function may not be familiar to some parents. It refers to a group of important mental skills that allow us to set goals and get things done. There are 3 main areas of executive function: working memory, flexible thinking, and inhibitory control, which includes self-control. Working memory is the ability to keep information in mind so you can then put it to use. Flexible thinking is being able to see problems from multiple angles and find different ways to solve them. And self-control is the ability to stop before you respond on impulse, to control your attention and your behavior, and to manage your emotions. Kids who struggle with executive function often have trouble paying attention and focusing, organizing and planning, starting and completing tasks, and shifting focus from one task to another. It's important to know that executive function issues don't have much to do with intelligence. Kids with executive function issues can be just as smart as their peers who don't have these challenges. It's not clear exactly what causes executive function issues, but we're learning more all the time. Research using MRI shows that people who struggle with these skills have slower development in the parts of the brain that are responsible for executive function. There also seems to be a genetic component. Many kids who struggle with executive function have a parent who also does. Things in the environment could also play a role, including high stress, poor nutrition and sleep, lack of exposure to language, and low quality of caregiving. Problems with executive function are closely tied to ADHD, but kids with ADHD aren't the only ones who have trouble with these skills. Many kids with learning issues also have weaknesses in executive skills that contribute to their challenges. For example, some kids with dyslexia have trouble with working memory. So even after they've become fluent readers, they might have problems with reading comprehension. They might have a hard time understanding a chapter they're reading because they can't remember what happened in the chapter before it. Executive function develops over time, so many kids find they have fewer challenges with it by the time they're young adults. But these problems don't always disappear completely. The good news is that there are ways parents and teachers can help kids improve executive function and learn strategies for working around their challenges. Classroom accommodations like extended time and preferred seating can help. So can tutoring and organization skills. Research shows that even brief interventions teaching kids how to pause and reflect before they respond leads to improved executive function and actual changes in how the brain functions. And for kids with ADHD, treatment for that disorder can often reduce the symptoms caused by weak executive function skills. With the right supports, kids with executive function issues can do as well in school as their peers and have an easier time managing the tasks and activities of daily life.
All right, let's put in the chat top 2 things you heard, or something new and novel that you heard Dr. Carlson state. Yeah, Dana, you said you often see this presented as autism or ADHD. Oftentimes they have overlapping signs and symptoms that look familiar, which is why we need the right professionals to really investigate to see if it's an executive function issue, if it's an EF issue compared or existing with ADHD, or definitely if there are signs and symptoms that this child or adolescent may be somewhere along that spectrum, definitely. Oh, I see some great ones. So Sarah Bell says closely associated with ADHD. Britton says new for me, can have a genetic component, right? That piece where she said, we're finding that a parent, children who have executive function issues have a parent who largely have one. Yeah, that's eye-opening, right? Hillary said the same thing. Trouble with EF often has a genetic component. Nora said it, all right. Ron says, teaching children to pause and reflect before responding. And Dr. Carlson and her team actually have created these mindfulness activities along with Dr. Zalazo, who you're going to hear from in a much shorter video, around just having children to, around mindfulness, take the ability to breathe, to concentrate before speaking. Or Adele Diamond is famous for, she created this little experiment where she had 2 picture cards. One is of the sun and one is of the moon. And first she shows the kid the card and she wants him to say the opposite. So when the kid sees the sun, they start saying sun, but they were supposed to say moon. And then she teaches them a little song. And she calls it a little ditty. In the song basically takes what she wants them to do and puts it in a rhythmic form So now when the child sees the sun, she puts in the song the importance of stopping and thinking. So the kid keeps hearing her, hey, stop and think. And you see him make this shift in terms of looking at her before speaking. And he started to increase in what? Getting it correct. Dr. Carlson did one similar where she taught something that we're all familiar with, head, shoulders, knees, and toes. But when she held up head, children were supposed to touch their toes. When she held up toes, they were supposed to touch their head. So it's this game of opposites that they were doing. How do we do what Otis did? How do I slow myself down and stop and think about what's expected? Are simple, playful ways that researchers have found we can build EF skills in young children. Oh, thank you, Rochelle. Rochelle said things in the environment impact executive functions. Yes. Nora says nutrition, rest, and sleep. Yeah, I can't unpack enough to millennial parents that why children need sleep is profound. Because when we sleep, that is when our bodies eliminate all the toxins that is pulled in. That every opening in your body is pulling in toxins throughout the day. Our ears, our eyes, our nose, our skin. And when we sleep, our body shuts down and does the other work of collecting those toxins so that we can wake up, which is why most of us have to go to the bathroom when we wake up, because our body's been working. I remember Ms. Val, who's on the call, she had a little boy whose parent would say, he doesn't sleep. We just give him the tablet and he just stays up all night. And we would see it demonstrated when he came to her family childcare home of not getting sleep and how it can impair. And in some areas, he was off the charts around his articulation, but social and emotionally, he only wanted to talk to adults. The other children his age, he had no interest in them. It was an executive function thing going on that I felt like largely was coming from his lack of sleep, that his mother was basically admitting that she gives him the tablet because she's going back to sleep, and he would stay up all night playing on the tablet night after night after night. Sarah Bell says preferred tutoring. Yeah, we never think of that because we think of tutoring as math and literacy, but we could get tutored. Think of tutoring as skill building. You can get tutored in anything. In any area, you could be tutored in. So I think, how do we expand our understanding and version of how we often experience tutoring in this country? Awesome. So Susanna says, we remember 80% of what we see and 10% of what we hear, visual charts. And from Dr. Carlson's video, the brains of children are likely to be developing, there you go, more slowly in areas. So when we're with groups of children and we're saying this child isn't doing it or this child is a problem, it could possibly well be they need more skill building because what's developing in other children isn't developing at the same pace and rate. So how do we open the capacity to meet their individual need that says, I don't want them to do something different. Guess who's going to do something different? I am as the adult. And that's the hard work for most of us, not putting all the responsibility on the child, but saying, I'm going to show up and do some things differently. And then when I do it differently, I'm promoting that skill for that young child or these young children. Okay, I'm going to speed up here because we did some of this, but in terms of going deeper. So we mentioned earlier that executive functions is really an umbrella term for what researchers call a neurologically based skill that helps us to manage, helps us to organize, and helps us to process, right? So think of how do we manage, organize, and process in daily life. Here's a big caveat. We all have executive function deficits in some way. I'm going to say that again. We all have executive function deficits in some way. I've talked to you all about some of mine that are, issues of where I'm weak. And then there are other areas where I'm very, very strong. So in the next couple of slides, we're going to do what I just did, define executive function skills, understand how they're connected to socio-emotional learning, and then go into the difference between hot and cool executive functions, where I want to spend most of the time. All right. So this notion of executive function is a distinct set of skills that we talked about earlier, thinking of working memory, inhibitory control, and cognitive flexibility. And what they find is these skills are imperative for school readiness and academic success. They're imperative. So on this slide, I'm at the left side. Most scientists say that these sets of skills are the biological foundation for us to adapt and to learn throughout our life. All right, throughout our life. So this notion of our brains being malleable, this process of, what Jack Shankoff and his team at Harvard call the air traffic control system that supports this process of learning. How do we focus and remember? How do we plan? That's the how of that enables us to effectively master any kind of content. Remember, school readiness and academic success is what they're going after here. So this notion of how do I become a competent reader, writer, in terms of, and a competent math, not just learner, but I understand computation. They call that the what of the learning. However, all of these, for us to get to that right side of that, what they call critical success, has to be supported from infancy through adolescence, from infancy through adolescence. So the researchers also found that there's some interesting differences between how executive function skills work in the real world. So they said that these differences relate to how our own emotions, I'll say that again, how our own emotions and motivation influence our executive function skills in different contexts, So this notion of emotions is big for me right now because my project that I work with at Yale, we're digging deeper into emotions. And I did a presentation for First Five Alameda last year where we talked about the 6 basic universal emotions. But then Dr. Lisa Barrett's research said she dug deeper into that research and realized that those 6 universal ones wasn't them doing research globally, because they said these 6 universal were across cultures. So now I have to stop saying that. Her research found that those researchers got together and said, these are the 6 that we vote on. And then they said that they were universal. Scandalous, right? So this notion of how the differences in our emotions and our motivations influence our executive function skills changes from context to context, and they're not universal. We have to understand who children are. And this distinction from context to context, they've grouped together as cool and hot, or I would like to say, easy, difficult, positive, not so positive. Let's look at them in a real practical way. So if we think of cool executive functions skills, these are situations where the stakes are low and there is no emotional or motivational context for the most part. Here, I'm just playing on the piano. We're practicing on the piano. I'm learning a little bit, but the stakes are low. There's no mandate that I do it. We do this once or twice a week. We call it practice, but there's no real serious motivation. This is tapped into what the cool executive functions for this child. So the more hot an executive function task is, the more effort we have to put into managing our own emotions and stress. So we see what happens here is there's the absence of a supportive adult. No one's playing with me. Here, there may be a different type of motivation that's tied to her playing the piano. So the stakes become high. She might have to play a piano piece in 20 seconds. And if she wins, she might win $5,000. So the stakes are high. The amount of practice she has to put in it changes. This creates a different situation. So the goal for us is how do we get her to stay in the cool zone and not in the hot zone? We've seen this demonstrated over the last probably 9 months with many athletes, many who happen to be female and women of color, who said, I can't do this anymore. It's taxing on me socially and emotionally. What they were really saying was, I've jumped from the cool zone and I've been in the hot zone too long and I'm feeling the effects. Here's what keeps it cool: supportive adults and how we help children approach the problem and address it calmly. The number 2 ways to do that is that they have a supportive adult who's helping to promote the cool aspects of practicing the piano and the rewards, and the child practicing. So this, the double P, promoting and practice with a calm, supportive adult, opposed to an adult who's yelling, angry, makes me anxious, and only focuses on what? Winning, 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 winning. But if they focus on promoting and me enjoying it in practice, we de-escalate me in the hot executive functions and bringing me down to the cool so that I don't lose control when I'm living in the hot. Then when we compare how SEL and executive functions, what we really know here is that the executive function skills are the root of all of these abilities in terms of academic success and socio-emotional competencies. That they're at the heart of it. I like Castle's framework that's on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, we see the 3 core executive functions of working memory, inhibitory control, and cognitive flexibility. Then on the right-hand side, we see how Castle has taken those and broken them down into manageable things that we can understand. And then there's a whole, if this was a training on this, we would go deeper into the framework, because each one of these has like 5 or 6 elements under them and things that we do to build self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness pieces that we tease out. But the takeaway for us is, without the strong base in executive function, working memory, inhibitory control, and cognitive flexibility, our social-emotional competence becomes at risk as young children or even adults. So some of the researchers in executive function, Dr. Adele Diamond, have said that the best predictors of school and learning readiness, long-term academic success, and overall well-being is having strong executive functions, having strong executive functions. So because it's a set of skills that helps our brain, they're connected in many ways, that what? Things that we do every day. When we think of how do we monitor and manage our actions, where does our attention and thoughts go, and our emotions and behaviors. Let's look at executive functions at schools. Executive functions at schools. So the more that we understand what this looks like in our daily, everyday lives of the children that we work, care for, and spend time with, then we can add the right supports, Remember, these are crucial for academic and lifelong success. They are. So when we respond to the challenging interactions that children are negotiating with each other in the context of whatever early learning setting they're in, but when we respond to promote, not to say you did this and to do this, but to promote the desired behaviors around working memory, inhibitory control, and cognitive flexibility, we're helping children to consistently and continually build those skills. All right. Remember we talked about offering visuals. So providing the right kinds of instructions, or what we may think of even as directions, helps children to become effective. What are we doing to make the connections between home and school to make that shift? Because our classroom or home is much like what? A living entity, if you think of it. And keeping all the parts of that classroom or that home running efficiently, it takes what? Persistence, resilience, that are all low-hanging fruits of executive functioning. This notion of modeling, how do we begin to see and watch adults modeling what they're asking us to do? So very young children, infants, toddlers, preschoolers, they do 2 things. These are 2 research terms that you can Google. They social gate and they social reference. They watch our face, and our face tells them this is how you should feel about this. and they watch our behavior that says this is how you respond to this. So we're always modeling, and children are picking up without us saying anything around this notion of social gating and social referencing. And of course, engaging in these serve and return. Again, this is Jack Shunkoff and his team at Harvard, interactions with children. And we know that this kind of back and forth reciprocal interaction is at the heart of interactions. So if we use the word interactions and development a lot in the context of early childhood. So I want to encourage you all to see development as not just developmental for the child, but the serve and return relationship as developmental. That the more you build relationship with them, the more it should be increasing on the positive end. So the serve and return is developmental, meaning you need to understand as the adult that this should be increasing as time goes on and not staying the same. That's at the heart of serve and return relationships, because you're meeting what my developing needs. And when you do that, you're building my executive functions, because you help me to try new approaches. You scaffold and challenge me. You see things from my vantage point. You offer me choices, right? And then we negotiate and problem solve together. All of this is how we really support executive functions in day-to-day interactions with young children. But because of our lack of awareness regarding executive functions, most of us, myself included, have missed, or we appear to miss, how this shows up and how we can support it in our daily lives with young children. I'm moving fast on purpose because all the activities are at the end. So this next piece in your handout, if you have the slide deck, I'm only going to go over 2 of these slides. The rest of it you can read on your own. So this notion of measuring executive functions. So I'm going to give you all my go-to tool here. My go-to tool around it's a free resource that Stephanie Carlson and Philip Zalazo has created, and it's called the Executive Function Go. So at last examination, you have to use a tablet or iPad. You can't download it on your phone or use it on your computer screen, because children have to tap on it. Even though we can tap on our phone, the last time I looked at it, it wouldn't let me download it. And it's free. And here's why it's free. It's free because when you sign up, they want your children to use it, but you can assess them in terms of these tasks that they offer on the tablet, and how quick and how correct the children respond to the tasks. They're not really difficult tasks, but when you see them in action, you're like, oh, I get it. And basically when you sign up, I'll put the link in the box also, Leah. When you sign up, you're giving them permission to basically look at how that child is actually scoring correctly or incorrectly regarding those tasks. For those people on the call who run programs, I know there are some of you who run programs or work with young children, large groups of children, or you may want to just download it for your own child or children. That's fine too. So what I'm trying to do here, sorry, I'm moving from screen to screen. I'm going to put the list in the box. So in the chat box is the link to the Executive Function Go, so that you can look at it later on your own. I often tell people, do what I do. When I get resources, I often download them. I use them for a while and see if it's useful to what I do. And then I either talk about it or don't talk about it. And of course, the 3-year-olds and the 4.5-year-old that are here, I had their mother download it on the tablets and had them play with it so that we could see its usefulness. We both liked it. We both appreciated the resource, and watching them And of course, the 3-year-olds did not do as well as the 4.5-year-old. And we anticipated that, but we were really looking at how well she would do around the executive function skills. She wasn't perfect, but she actually did really well. She's much like her older cousin. She moves really fast. Because she was moving fast, she was what? Making simple errors. So use it, and then tell me and Leah about your use. So the big clarion call here is we must teach executive function skills. There's no way around it. And this teaching is what we're going to get at in our final moments together. This teaching is what we're going to get at. But this teaching around executive function skills, it actually happens in many, many spaces where many of us exist. One of those spaces, it's in our National Association of Young Children standards. And I often encourage people when they're using standards, I often say, everywhere you see the word child, replace the word child with the word adult. Replace the word child with the word adult. So if I put some of the standards here, and this is just one of the open documents, but if you go through accreditation, it becomes more expansive. And I often say, read through it. This is only 72 pages, but everywhere you see the word child, even though this one is geared towards adults, replace what we want children to learn, know, and do with what we're asking adults to learn, know, and do, and then see what happens. See what happens. And then many of you on the call, I know, in many forms are parts of Head Start programs. So if you think of the ELOF, the Early Learning Outcomes Framework, direct correlations to executive function are there. Again, in the ELOF, this is on the eClick website. So let's just say I go down here to socio-emotional for infants and toddlers domains. And I actually like the ELOF. Some people are challenged by it. I like it because when they wrote about it, they wrote it from this vantage point of developmental progression, meaning we've got to get out of this space that I teach 4-year-olds or I teach 3-year-olds, with this notion of if I work with young children and understand child development, if I have a classroom for 4-year-olds, I still need to know how 2- and 3-year-olds develop and how 5- and 6-year-olds develop, because I may see some of what those behaviors in my chronologically 4-year-old children. In the developmental progression is saying we can't see it as this fixed ages and stages. We've got to expand and see it along this progression, and that all children won't ever be at the same place at the same time. But here's just an example of what I like to challenge folk to do. Here where we have the goal for SEL 1, 2, and 3, each one begins with the word child. And I often say, cross the word child out and put the word the adult or the teacher, because that's what needs to happen for them to promote it, that they've got to what? Develop the expectations of consistent positive interactions through secure relationships with themselves as the adult. That is at the heart of promoting executive function skills. Not showing up saying children need to do this, because when we start there, unfortunately, we've historically created this chasm that's deficit viewed, that we start off by saying children don't know enough, opposed to seeing their capacities and their capabilities. All right. So Dr. Carlson mentioned some of these, but I just wanted to offer another slide before we hear from Dr. Zalazo and then move into how to support executive function skills in young children, infancy up into elementary school. So what you see here, because executive function skills are learned with practice and a little bit of help, all children can improve their executive functions. Practice makes us better. What we see here on the screen is just some of the warning signs for us to pay attention to, that this child or groups of children that you may work with and teach or parent or care for in some way may be struggling with some executive function issues. The other part of this chart that I encourage people to look at is when you go through it, I'm sure for those of you who work with adults, if you don't work in the box, almost every one of these you can probably attribute to either yourself or another adult that you work with, or an adult in your house or home. See how it carries over into adulthood? So if it's not promoted, the skill building required, these issues carry over into adolescence and into adulthood. So Nora, you asked the question, the executive function Go app, yeah, it's basically for preschool children. It's basically for preschool children. Now in the handouts, Nora, I only gave one, but there are actually three. I gave, because they're not really normed. They're just what some researchers put together around checklists. So if you want it for older children who are school age, I only put one there, but I have three. And if you look at the, I know I had, Leah, you can tell me, I know we had gathered them before, but did those only go to the people who were part of the one we recorded and it was unlisted, or are they online, those other three handouts? Because I know I had given you the checklist before, Leah. So Nora, we have some for older children and adults that are kind of checklists for us to go over and just think about our executive function issues presenting themselves. Okay, so now we're going to hear from another person who I follow religiously, Philip David Zalazo, who's a colleague of Dr. Stephanie Carlson. So in this video, he's going to talk to us for about 1 minute and 51 seconds. Two questions I want you to ask yourself while you're watching this video. In what ways are you aware of your own learning? In what ways are you aware of your own learning? And how can we help children become aware of what they are learning? How can we help children become aware of what they are learning? Our two reflective questions here.
Individuals who have well-developed executive function skills look different, not only in their behavior, but also in their brain activity and even in their brain structures. Based on decades of research in developmental neuroscience, it's increasingly clear that when we do anything, when we engage executive function skills in particular and use them, we're activating networks in our brain. The use of those networks changes the networks every time. Cognitive flexibility is a skill that depends on networks in the brain, and it's a skill that gets easier with use as the corresponding brain regions become more efficient. They become more efficient in a number of different ways. For example, extraneous connections get pruned away so that you're only left with the circuits that really matter. It really does come down to practice, and one always has to increase the level of challenge in order for that practice to continue to be useful. These are skills just like any other skill, like riding a bicycle or skiing. They may be more or less challenging, and some children may have an easier or a harder time acquiring these skills, but ultimately they can be improved by practice and by self-awareness about what it is that one's learning.
All right, so we ask you to think about why Dr. Zalazo was speaking. In what ways are you aware of your own learning? In what ways are you aware of your own learning? Maybe we can have someone unmute and share ways that you are aware of your own learning, and others share yours in the chat so that we can resource from each other. But if someone wants to unmute, I would love to hear someone's voice come into the Zoom around ways that you're aware of your own learning.
I know that I'm a poor auditory learner.
right.
I need to have things written down or, as you mentioned, visually available in order to really intake them.
Awesome. Thank you, Hillary. Thank you. And then the second question, how can we help children become aware of what they are learning? How can we help children become aware of what they are learning? Someone want to unmute and share your idea about that? Angela.
maybe ask questions around what they have just read or what they just learned about to help reaffirm what they just took in.
Awesome, that's right. So that we can hear as the adult, because that's the way that we get from them, and we can assess to hear, oh, they were tracking exactly what happened. Uh-oh, you know what? I may need to read this book again and again and again. That's how working memory happens. Oh, they understood more than I thought they would understand. They made some connections between the book and real life here in our home, or here in our home visiting program, or our play group. All of that begins to happen when we help children become aware of their own learning. And remember, we said one of the skills is what? Thinking and talking out loud. So in answering your question and saying it out loud, we're what? Building those core executive functions. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Hillary. Keep putting how you are aware of your own learning in the chat, and how you can help children become aware of what they're learning. Keep sharing, keep sharing. Thank you all in the chat. All right, so now we're going to finish our time together with strategies for executive function learning. We're going to start with children ages 6 to 12 months. 6 to 12 months. So basically, think of it as for 6 to 12 months, or I like to say children 12 months and under. Children 12 months and under, which is what I should have put there. Lap games, playing lap games with children. These are oftentimes children who are at the age, we call them babies, that we have to hold them. So think of when I'm holding the baby, what can I do with them on my lap? Peekaboo is that classic familiar game that builds the executive function in young children, that working memory. Uh-oh, Shawn's face went away, it came back. His face went away, it came back. When we think of serve and return, not talking at the baby, but talking with the baby, describing things that are happening around them, even though you know that baby can't respond to you, still talk to them as if they could. So if you were at the zoo, talk to that baby about every animal you see, not just the colors, but what you think they're feeling, what they might eat, all the things that are happening around them. We want to not just label, but we want to talk to them by using more rich and expansive vocabulary, by focusing their attention on what it is we're looking at. Even if they're in the stroller, or if we got them in the carrier, we want to talk to them about that. Even if we're home, even if we're in the car and you're in the back seat, in the car seat, we want to talk to them about what we're seeing while we're driving. Practical ways that build executive function in young children. And this third one, when we talk about age-appropriate toys, that varies from context to context, and sometimes culture to culture. It does. So I want to focus more on household objects. My eldest nephew, who's my parents' oldest grandchild, is 19. Okay, he'll actually be 20 in a few more days. His birthday's this weekend. And when he was a baby in Philadelphia and I lived in California, I was always sending things. I was just always just buying him stuff and sending him stuff. And my brother tells stories to this day. He says, I don't think I spent any money on my first child, his whole first and second year of life, because my brother was always buying stuff that he kind of recused himself and said, I'm not buying anything. And then I would come home and we were at my mom's house and he was on the floor in the kitchen because, you know, him and grandma are like this to this day. He had a cabinet in her kitchen that was all of her old pots. So in the living room was like the hundreds of dollars worth of stuff that I bought for him to learn and to build his executive skills. He would play with it, but he wanted to go into the kitchen, that one cabinet that he could open, and he would grab those pots and bang them and make noise for hours. I understand now, and the way I understood then was it was skill building. It was him seeing you come here and you do these things and you make food, and then we all eat the food, because he was picking up on all of that. So this notion of banging on the pots was really not just exploring, but making those connections to what he was experiencing in the real world. Some of the most successful and foundational play experiences we can give children if we have the space and the capacity as the adults to offer that. And this final one here is what the researchers call imagination games, but I still call them everyday kind of lap experience, clapping games. Where is Stumpkin, and changing the name for infants and toddlers to their names, even though we know that that baby can't pick up their fingers and move their fingers and thumbs, and many toddlers struggle with that fine motor piece. But building the skill, we don't do it simply because they can't. We want them to have the experience, and it's not an isolated experience. It's one that we build on over and over, and that they carry from the infant years into the toddler years. All right. This is all executive function skill building. So I just talked about playing Where is Stumpkin and changing the names to where is Susan, where is Ron, where is Nora, where is Renuka, where is Flandra. You want a toddler to pay attention to you, use their name. Use their name. They're going to give you their full on attention. And if you don't say their name, they're going to say, I'm next, right? I'm next. Say my name. Say my name. They're going to turn into Destiny's Child on you real quick. So these playing with our fingers and pointing games, it's more than that for them, because they're learning how to focus. The hand-eye coordination is important, but they're bringing working memory, inhibitory control to be able to hold and focus. And if you work with toddlers and you do this over and over, I guarantee you, you're going to see this. In the beginning, they're going to be doing like this with their fingers. You keep going, 5 months later, you're going to start to see this happening. You're going to start to see this happening with the practice. They're going to refine the skills that are related to what calling on working memory, slowing down, and being able to anticipate, uh-oh, he called 3 names, there's a 4th name coming, so I need a 4th finger up. Watch it happen, watch it happen. Then when we think of expectations and moving away from that to directions, when we're engaging with children around, we're going to stand up and wash our hands, or are we going to stand up and wash our hands 2 at a time, or to refine the directions? And I'm doing this intentionally because this is what I hear teachers doing with toddlers. I need Claudia and Denisha to stand up, and we're going to wash our hands. The more refined the direction, the more their listening skills hone in, because then what happens is Otis and Julie and Lynn start saying, well, I must be next because I'm at the table too. This is how we build that working memory of, uh-oh, when he calls our name, he takes us to the sink and we wash our hands and we come back. Here's what I often see. I just actually saw this in a toddler program. There were like 6 children playing. This was an early Head Start classroom. And the teacher was in the other side of the room because they had to walk out to go to the bathrooms like across a hall. And all these children are learning to potty. So she says, all right, it's time to potty. They all got up and walked to the door. They did what she said because their working memory says time to potty means we go to the door and we walk across the hall. Then she said, oh, we didn't clean up. We didn't clean up. 2 of the kids turned around and went back. 2 of them stood at the door and had tantrums. They fell out because what they heard was get up and come potty. And then when she went and let them through the door, because she was saying clean up, they were actually listening. Her instructions were the problem. And of course, we had a coaching session about it and she fought me teeth and nails, and I kind of just backed away because she wasn't ready to hear it. And then when I came back the following week, she was real intentional about what she was saying. So she heard it, she just didn't want to admit it during the conversation. But the way she set up the directions did not help her, because the children said, we heard what you said because we know what's happening next, even though she didn't say it. So refining it helps build their executive functions. We talked about where is Stumpkin, but going back to finger painting, not being afraid to get a little bit dirty, not being afraid to take children outside or to put some paper or some blankets down that they can get dirty, or a sheet and let them sit and engage in that creativity that's really connected to executive functions. It's something as simple as, what do we have in our environments that children can use to scoop and pour? If it's not beans, it could be water, it could be sand, it could be flour, anything that they can scoop and pour. It could be those little pom-poms. It could be a variety of useful everyday things. Here we just did on Sunday, right in this house, we sat at the table, the dining room table, and my dining room table is glass, and everybody had paper. And then we had, I have some colored tape, and we all just ripped sizes of tape that we wanted and made our own tape creation on the paper. We made our own tape creation. And I was thinking, this is going to last probably 5 minutes with these two. They sat there for over 20 minutes and made multiple tape creations. So I had to let go of, you know what? He pulled the piece of tape that was longer than the paper. I didn't say stop. These are all these pieces that build these skills we want in young children. Opportunities, experiences, because my job is to promote it so that they can practice the skills. So let's move up to our 2 to 3 year olds, No, although we're breaking it down into discrete ages, you all realize that many of these things you can use with children across the developmental continuum. Let me just say that out loud so that we don't get boxed in. So not just singing songs and playing games, but ones that have instructions. This is important. So go through your repertoire and see, what songs do I have that have instructions like Mother May I? And then where children have to practice turn taking, like Simon Says, starting and stopping, starting and stopping. Who does it well, like Otis? Who struggles like Shawn? So that might mean I need to bring Shawn and some others together to do it more and more and more. Rochelle put in the chat around the environmental influences that Dr. Carlson talked about. How are we helping children get to do new and different environments? And as a former preschool teacher, I struggled with this. I hated leaving the building. I understood the beneficial piece of it, which is why we did it, but I hated leaving the building. But field trips offer children new experiences and ways to adjust in different environments. And I found out later that children are actually better when we front load them at understanding what the rules and expectations are. And not in a negative way, but if we say, you know, when we get to the museum, there are going to be ropes there. The stuff behind the rope, we can't touch. If there's no rope, we can touch it. We used to have to do that with elementary school children. Now most major cities have what? Children's museums. In Philadelphia, it's called the Please Touch Museum. The name says it all. Please touch each and everything here. Now my cousin's paranoid. We have tickets, but she won't take her kids because she swears that they're not cleaning the stuff. And she's afraid that her kids are going to come home with COVID or monkeypox. No matter how much I say, I don't think that's going to happen. She doesn't want to go. She's really fearful. But these different places, and she has a pandemic baby. Her 3-year-old was a baby in the pandemic. But new places and practicing the behaviors expected at new places. And some of us, that's church, the synagogue, or the mosque. For others, it's things in our environment. It could be walking to the neighborhood park. If we're at home with our families, it could be going to the play group and giving simple, not really restrictive and rigid, but simple expectations for behavior helps to build executive functions. Here's a big one. When we think of putting things away after we've played with them as organizational skill building. That same teacher I just mentioned, when she started to get them to clean up, she was saying, put everything back, put everything back. And then I couldn't stand anymore. And I went over and I helped. And I held the basket and I said, put all the trucks in the basket. And they all grabbed trucks. One of the kids grabbed the truck off the shelf and put it in the basket. And then I said, would you put this one on the shelf? And I grabbed another one. And I said, would you put all the tracks in this basket? That's how we help them organize the skills. We have a role and responsibility to help build them with young children. And of course, my favorite, because I wanted to be the leader, playing follow the leader, and children following what someone else is doing. As children get older, we call it mirroring, where they stand in front of each other and you have to do what the other person does. So we could, if one teacher or group is working with 2 and 3-year-olds and they're playing follow the leader, and then the next group does what is working with 4 and 5-year-olds, they can expand on that and do the mirror activity, which is an extension of whatever I do. We stand in front of each other. And if I move this hand, you move your hand. If I move this hand, if I wiggle my nose, if I lift my leg up, children love it and they have a good time. And the beauty of it is multiple children can do it at one time. You don't, everybody doesn't have to stand and watch and wait. So here's a big one that we often don't think of. Now I'm gonna talk about this one for a few minutes. This notion of encouraging imaginary play. So there are 2 things in our early learning settings, well, everything in the early learning setting, but there are 2 big ones that I see in more and more early learning settings. I see them in private settings, in public settings, in Head Start settings, federally funded settings. I see them across program type, that we tell children we don't like how they're playing in the social dramatic play space. And then we say, the dramatic play area is closed today. So if there's anything I want to caution you never to do when you're working with young children, that's the closed dramatic play space. I don't think any area should be closed, but the dramatic play space in your block building area, these are 2 areas. And I'm seeing more and more teachers, they have sheets. I had one teacher, she had yellow caution tape. And when I got there, I said, what? I was thinking, did the ceiling fall? Like, what did I miss yesterday? She said, oh no, they were just acting wild over there. Acting wild? What do you mean? And then she explained that, you know, they were having a lot of fun and they got loud, but she internalized it as wild. When we think of executive function, when children go to the social dramatic play space, this is one of the areas in their lives where those core 3 get integrated. Many activities integrate them all, but social dramatic play integrates working memory, inhibitory control, and cognitive flexibility. The same way cooking experiences. If you cook with young children, the 4.5-year-old here, she loves to cook with her mama. I can't tell you how many rainbow pancakes I've had to eat since they've lived with me. And I'm a French toast kind of man, but I hear a knock on my door, Cousin Shawn, I made pancakes. I get up and waddle on down the steps and smile and eat those rainbow pancakes. If I don't eat another rainbow pancake, I'm gonna be okay. But she'll never know that. But she's cooking with her mother and she gets excited. So this social dramatic play and this cooking, they build working memory, inhibitory control, and cognitive flexibility because they're integrating all of them. What we call mature play experience would say, we're in the house area. And then we say, you know what? It's Renuka's birthday. We want to make her a birthday cake. The adult can promote it by saying, well, how do we make a birthday cake? Not, you need flour, you need eggs. No. How do we make a birthday cake? That open-ended question. Oh, Otis said milk. Hillary said her grandmother used flour to make a cake. Do we need anything else? Those are called ingredients. The teacher facilitates and the adult, I should say, leads them through that process and says, okay, where do we go to get these ingredients? We got to go to ShopRite. We go to Trader Joe's in my house. They're both grocery stores. We can go to both of them. It doesn't make a difference because they might get into that kind of thing that they've heard parents model, thinking one is better than the other. We get those things and we come back. They're at school though. So they're making the cake for Renuka's birthday, right? Then they need roles. Somebody has to play the cashier. Somebody has to pay with the money. Somebody has to cook. We all have to sing happy birthday. That's all working memory, calling what I know about the past, slowing down to take my role, to build it in the moment. These aren't scripted lines children are participating in. They're making it up as they go. In the cognitive flexibility to change course as they're doing it. This is why this is so crucial. When we promote it and facilitate it, we're building some core skills building here if we offer children a rich and robust social dramatic play experience. A similar thing happens when we're cooking with children. They have to follow the instructions. We need this much, this much flour. We need how many eggs? We have to whisk them together. We have to beat them together. In showing children what those things are and letting them do it, we have to mix it. We have to keep stirring until it gets flat. Those are lumps. Don't you see those lumps? We have to keep stirring until it disappears. Then we have to pour it into all of these little containers and put it in the oven, and we're going to bake it for 20 minutes. Let's put the timer on. All of that is using working memory, inhibitory control, and cognitive flexibility. So I think back to being that cute little handsome chubby boy. My Aunt Mary used to always bake cakes every time I was there. I could care less about the cake. You know what I wanted to do? What? She would let me lick the bowl at the end. That was the best part. I only participated in the cake making because I wanted her to pour the cake batter out into the pan, and then she would say, go ahead. And I would go to town with the spoon and the cake batter because that's all I wanted. That's all I wanted. But I went through the motions of making the cake to get the end result. So for me, it was a goal directed, like the marshmallow test. The end result is I get to lick the batter, and that's what I want. Imaginary play as ongoing practice, these core pieces that we have in our spaces with young children that really build these skills, but we miss opportunities to build them. And of course, with some people call open-ended art, craft time, opportunities for children to not have an end result, but for them to use materials. I just gave you one where we had different colored tape and different colored paper. Those were the two materials that we used. And they went to town on them. And then you can build more complexity. We might have some glue, some cardboard materials, some different 3 or 4 materials that they can glue and build up. All of these things for them to not just build, but then to talk about. Not necessarily the process behind their building, but what did you build and why? And the story that's attached to what they built, giving them the time and space to go into details about their why. Then we're going to get into their thinking and their process. And this notion of, if Ron's working with 4 children and we all share, I've got to wait while Wyatt is sharing. I've got to wait while Nevaeh is sharing. We're building these skills because I know I'm going to get a turn to talk about my creation and to do some storytelling. Then this notion of us asking questions while completing puzzles or games. We can ask children questions, and this gets into Carol Dweck's growth mindset. But these questions aren't questions that have one answer. If we ask questions, in addition to children asking questions, but this is us supporting and promoting it. These should be open-ended questions that have multiple answers, not one answer, not a right or wrong, not a right or wrong. But then we teach them to ask themselves questions. So if I'm putting together a puzzle, and what Nora's taught me, this is the perimeter of the puzzle, and that's one way to put the puzzle together is to get all the pieces that are smooth, and that makes the perimeter, and then start getting the puzzle pieces for the middle. That's one way to do it. So the question that I can ask myself is, do I have all the puzzle pieces for the perimeter? Then what's my next question? Which pieces should I match together? Am I going to put the box up and look at the box for guidance? Or do I do it without the box? All of this is what developmental progression. The 3-year-olds in the early 4 might want to look at the box. The 4.5-year-old might say, that's what little kids do. I can put this together without the box. All of those questions we help them to ask themselves. And then of course, this notion of extending that creative play by bringing in more robust play materials like clay and wax. I didn't play with wax as a child. I started to play with wax as a preschool educator and realized that I loved it. I loved playing with wax because I realized later that it relaxed me. When you have to do like this to make it smooth, it would calm me down. And I didn't know it until later that that's why I enjoyed it so much. But how are we bringing these experiences to young children to build their executive function skills? All right, Leah, we got 5 minutes. So I'm gonna move us along quickly. So strategies for executive function learning. They include repeating the sequence, reordering the sequence, visual recalling. So working memory. It's hearing the story over and over. Brown bear, what do you see? So one of my nephews, Joel, he loved that story. If you read it to him, you're going to have to read it at least 15 times in one setting. And he knew what was coming next. And that level of competence and confidence that he felt, which is why he wanted to do it over, but he was really using his working memory, giving children the sequence of directions. This is working memory. First, you go get your coat, then you zip it up, and then we're going to stand at the door. That's a sequence of directions that some children can achieve, others may find difficult, right? Working memory, working memory. So some games that you can play regarding working memory is visual recall, those card games, clearing the bees, the odd one out. I recommend that for older kids. That popcorn match, sorting objects, right? All of these are games. And some of these games are actually in the executive function Go tablet game from that I shared with you all. So a lot of them are there. Inhibitory control. This notion of how do I slow myself down and pause? And before I act or think or say something or send that email, how do I think about it? How do I reflect on it? Because it requires me to build my reflection skills. So in that executive function Go game, you'll find something called Track the Object, Peekaboo, Making Popcorn. They got a game called Mental Rotation and Sequencing. These are all games in there. And these are games that are inside the, those of you who've been here the whole time, they're gonna get that PDF with 172 activities. Many of these are in there also. And then this notion of cognitive flexibility. So if we think of the modes of attention, how am I shifting my attention between needing to type my report, getting to ask the question and coming back to it? How am I directing my attention to the computer in the report? How am I sustaining it? Meaning I've directed my attention, now I need to actually sit here for at least 20 minutes to get this all completed and done. Now I know when I was a mental health consultant and I shared an office with all the interns, and it was probably, we had a huge space. So during the day when everyone was there, they would be talking about their cases and clients. It was hard for me to do my reports because I was always ear hustling and hearing what other people were saying. And I would be doing this and stop typing and just do like this. Or most of the time we would all just roll our chairs over. They would do the same thing. If I were having a conversation, you would hear them stop typing, their heads would turn, and then their chairs would come over. So it was really hard to sustain attention. So many of us had the same thinking. We would try to come into the office after 5 o'clock, but then you come there and there are 5 people there. This didn't work. And then some of us would try to come on Saturdays. There's 7 of us here. It just didn't work. It just didn't work. We were all trying the same things and they were about attention when we were all there. So how do we help children, block out the distractions when they're playing, when they're focusing in our classrooms, in our play groups, during the home visitation, if there are older children there, and we have strategies for that, but how are we helping them to build what we call working memory, inhibitory control, and cognitive flexibility? All right, and of course, within the executive function Go, there are some key games there to help build cognitive flexibility in young children. So our takeaway is really this notion of putting it all together and how important it is for us to keep in mind that if we're working to improve one core executive function, we're actually working to improve all 3. If you're working to improve one, you're improving all 3. So let's spend the next minute doing some fun takeaways. All right. I call these knowledge nudges. Which one of the following would create a situation where hot executive function skills need to be applied? Which one of these create a situation where hot executive function skills need to be applied? You can unmute or put it in the chat. 10 seconds, not hard. Come on, who's gonna play? Hillary said B. You said playing in Monopoly for fake money. Anyone else agree? Valerie said A.
A.
Choosing between, that's right.
A.
It's A, choosing between eating one marshmallow now or waiting 3 minutes. That is that hot executive function. Awesome, Valerie, thank you. Next question. Which one of the following best illustrates a lack of impulse or inhibitory control? A lack of impulse or inhibitory control. 1, 2, 3, or 4. Susan said 2, that's right. I just had to have another piece of that candy. That's me at 10 o'clock at night, going downstairs for another cookie. Another knowledge nudge. Which are the 3 skills included in executive function? A, B, C, D, E, or F. All right, Hillary, it is ACE. It's A, C, and E. ACE. I tried to spell a word and be clever.
ACE.
Executive function skills cannot be trained. True or false?
False.
That's right. It's false. False, false. Children are not born with executive function skills. They develop over time with training and practice. All right. Next question. Children with well-developed executive function skills are more likely to manage their emotions, demonstrate empathy, and achieve academic success in school. True or false?
True.
That's right.
True.
True. Executive function skills are involved in the deliberate, top-down, goal-directed control of our attention. We're talking about the prefrontal cortex here. That's right. It's true. Next knowledge nudge. When children are encouraged to brainstorm possible solutions to a problem, they are using which executive function skill? Working memory, inhibitory control, cognitive flexibility. They are not using an executive function skill.
Working memory.
Working memory.
Working memory.
Working memory.
Working.
Nope.
Cognitive flexibility.
That's right. Who said that?
Flexibility.
It's cognitive flexibility. That's right. Their cognitive flexibility is thinking about something in multiple ways by looking at it new ways to solve a problem. Awesome, awesome. Children are being asked to change the way that they may be looking at the situation, which is why the brainstorming is helpful. Yeah. All right, we're almost there. 3 more slides and we're done. Thank you all for holding on. 2 minutes after. Teachers can make minor modifications to current instructional practices to support executive function development in all children. True or false? That's right. All right, they said that with power. True. Being able to follow a series of directions such as go upstairs, brush your teeth, get your backpack, and put your shoes on so we can get to school on time is an example of which executive function skill.
Working memory.
That's right. It's working memory. And some of us adults struggle with that because you gave me those instructions. I might not come back down the steps. I might just get in the bed and take a nap, my favorite activity right now in the world. Following the series of directions requires a child to hold information in mind so it can be used to complete the task of following those 4 steps. Final one, being reflective instead of reflexive is part of being mindful. True or false? Being reflective instead of reflexive is part of being mindful.
True.
All right, it is true. That is correct. We got to pay attention to the most tempting things we want to do. It's often misleading, right? In aspects of the object or the event. But when we reflect on it, it helps us slow us down and become mindful. So some minor ways executive function shows up in children's lives. All of these are ways that it can show up in children's lives. So when you think about the children you work with and you care for, when you see these things happening, they are working on their executive function skills. These happen in what? Everyday lives. All right. So think about these practical things that you see happening all the time. These are children who are using executive function. We've got to know it. And our final 3 slides is some of the handouts. I gave you a daily plan for what we call smart talk around executive functions. It's just a short guide to give you an idea. There's an executive function worksheet from the Attitude website that I follow them because they do a lot of ADHD and executive function trainings. And then another short kind of ages and stages. It starts with infants, moves into older infants, toddlers, preschoolers, and looks at those core 3 of cognitive flexibility, working memory, and inhibitory control, just to give you some more background for those who are interested in reading a little bit more. And of course, there's the one that we will email to you all who signed up and attended today, with lots of activities for you to extend. So as always, thank you all for spending 2 hours with us. It's time to evaluate. When Leah sends you the evaluation link, please complete it. Your feedback is important. They actually read it at First Five because your feedback determines if they keep funding trainings the way they fund it, because you know all First Fives don't do the same thing with their money. First Five Alameda has a commitment. They have a training department and they've been committed to it. So as time shifts and we maintain, this global pandemic, without your feedback, then that sends the message that training is not needed and necessary, and they'll allocate funds to different projects and programs. So when you go to these First Five trainings, not just this one, but all of them, your feedback is key and crucial for sustaining this project. Thank you all so much for spending 2 hours with us. I hope executive functions have been elevated for you. But thank you all. Thank you. I hope that you have some key core takeaways for executive function. And if we do the deeper dive in terms of having an EF learning community, or specifically honing in on executive function in adults, we hope to see many of you there. So stay safe, stay healthy, and continue to thrive. We appreciate you all.